His secretary scheduled his divorce attorney appointments, thinking I was clueless about their affair. She'd giggle when I called, knowing he was planning to leave me penniless. Everyone at his office knew the plan except stupid me, or so they believed. The day the divorce was finalized, I revealed what I'd really been planning all along. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in March when I found Tyler's phone buzzing against the marble countertop at 5:47 a.m. Not unusual, except he was still asleep beside me, and the message preview read, "Can't wait to see you today, handsome." My fingers hovered over the screen. In 23 years of marriage, I'd never once invaded his privacy. Trust had been our foundation, our unspoken agreement. But something cold slithered through my chest as I watched that message disappear, replaced by his usual alarm at 6 sharp. "Morning, beautiful," Tyler mumbled, reaching for his phone with practiced casualness. His thumb swiped the screen clean before I could blink. "Sleep well." "Like a rock," I lied, studying his face for tells I'd never needed to look for before. He smiled, the same boyish grin that had charmed me in college. But something felt rehearsed about it now, like he was performing rather than simply being. When had I started feeling like an audience to my own husband's life? The restaurant receipt fell from his jacket pocket 3 days later as I gathered clothes for dry cleaning. Chez Laurent, Thursday evening. I remembered Thursday clearly because I'd made his favorite pot roast and eaten alone again. The receipt showed 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, 1 shared dessert. The kind of intimate dinner we hadn't had in months. My hands trembled as I held the thin paper, imagining Tyler across from someone who wasn't me, sharing creme brulee while I scraped his untouched dinner into Tupperware containers. The betrayal felt physical, a sharp twist beneath my ribs that stole my breath. "Find anything interesting?" Tyler's voice from the doorway made me jump. I turned, the receipt still clutched in my palm. For a moment, we stared at each other across the chasm that had somehow opened in our bedroom. His eyes flicked to my hand and I watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Just gathering your dry cleaning," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He nodded slowly, but his gaze never left my face. "Thanks. You're always taking such good care of me." The words felt like mockery, though his tone remained gentle. I wanted to throw the receipt at him, demand explanations, fight for what we'd built together. Instead, I smiled and tucked it into my pocket. "Of course, honey. That's what wives do." But that night, after Tyler fell asleep with his phone clutched protectively against his chest, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and wondering when I'd become a stranger in my own marriage. The computer password discovery came 2 weeks later. I'd gone to print our tax documents from his home office, something I'd done countless times over the years. But when I tried to log in with his usual password, our wedding date followed by my initials, the screen flashed red. "Incorrect password." I tried variations. Our anniversary. His mother's birthday. The dog's name. Nothing. After 15 years of sharing everything, Tyler had locked me out of his digital life as efficiently as changing the locks on a house. The realization hit me like ice water. Whatever was happening, it was serious enough that he'd started covering his tracks. My reflection in his dark computer screen looked older than I remembered, more fragile. When had those lines appeared around my eyes? When had my husband started seeing me as a threat to be managed rather than a partner to be trusted? The phone calls to his office became a special kind of torture. Megan's voice grew progressively sweeter each time, like honey laced with poison. "Oh, hi there, Mrs. Matthews. Tyler's in a meeting right now, but I'll be sure to let him know you called." Her tone suggested she knew exactly why he couldn't come to the phone, and it had nothing to do with business meetings. There was an intimacy in the way she said his name, Tyler, not Mr. Matthews, that made my skin crawl. "Could you ask him to call me back? It's about dinner tonight." "Oh, I think he mentioned he'd be working late again. You know how dedicated he is to his projects." The barely concealed laughter in her voice made me want to reach through the phone and shake her. Instead, I thanked her politely and hung up, feeling more foolish each time. The office Christmas party crystallized everything I'd been trying not to see. Tyler had been distant for weeks, claiming stress about year-end deadlines, but he'd perked up considerably when I'd mentioned skipping the party. "You should go," I'd insisted, not wanting to be the wife who kept her husband from office social events. "I'll stay home with a good book." But something nagged at me as I watched him dress with unusual care, selecting his best suit and the cologne I'd given him for his birthday, cologne that had sat untouched on his dresser for months. I changed my mind an hour after he left, arriving at the downtown hotel just as dinner was being served. Tyler's back was to me as I entered the ballroom, but I spotted him immediately at a corner table. What I saw next felt like a physical blow. Megan sat beside him, not across from him as a professional colleague might, but close enough that their shoulders touched. She wore a delicate gold necklace that caught the light as she laughed at something he whispered in her ear. My breath caught in my throat. That necklace. I'd admired it 6 months ago in the jewelry store window during our last anniversary shopping trip. It's beautiful, I'd said, tracing the display glass with my finger. Tyler had glanced at the price tag and shaken his head. $3,000 for a necklace? That's a bit excessive, don't you think? I'd agreed, of course. I always agreed. But seeing it now, draped around another woman's neck while she basked in my husband's attention, the practicality felt less like wisdom and more like dismissal. I slipped out before Tyler noticed me, my face burning with humiliation. How many people at that party knew what I was only beginning to understand? How many pitying glances had I missed over the months? How long had I been the oblivious wife, the last to know her own story? The breaking point came on a rain-soaked Thursday in April. I'd returned early from my book club, cancelled due to the weather, and heard Tyler's voice from his home office. The door was slightly ajar and something in his tone made me pause in the hallway. I know, sweetheart. Just a few more months and this will all be behind us. My blood turned to ice. Tyler had never called me sweetheart. It was too saccharine for his taste, he'd always said. Honey, beautiful, love. Those were his endearments for me. Sweetheart belonged to someone else. The lawyer says we can expedite everything once I file. She won't see it coming, she's too trusting for her own good. Each word hit like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, afraid my legs might give out. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning my destruction. By Christmas we'll be free to do whatever we want. I promise you won't have to sneak around much longer. The casual cruelty in his voice, discussing my future like a business transaction, ignited something I didn't know existed inside me. The hurt remained sharp and constant, but it was joined by something harder, colder. Something that whispered, if they want to play games, I'll show them how it's really done. I backed away from the door silently, my mind already racing. Tyler thought he was dealing with the same trusting woman who'd never questioned a late night or challenged a suspicious receipt. But that woman had just died in the hallway of her own home, replaced by someone who understood that love without wisdom was just another word for victim. Let them think I was clueless. Let them believe their secret was safe. They'd taught me that marriage could be a performance, and I was about to give the performance of my life. The game was just beginning and they had no idea they'd already lost. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For 3 days after overhearing Tyler's phone call, I moved through our house like a ghost, smiling when he looked my way, nodding at his lies about late meetings. But inside, something sharp and calculating had awakened. Something that studied his patterns with forensic precision. That's when I remembered Josh Reynolds. Tyler's business partner had always been peripheral to our social circle, present at company functions but never lingering for small talk. He was the numbers guy, Tyler often said dismissively, as if mathematical precision was somehow less valuable than Tyler's flashy deal-making. But I'd noticed things about Josh that Tyler had missed. The way he listened before speaking. How his eyes tracked inconsistencies in presentations. The quiet intelligence that didn't need to announce itself. More importantly, I'd heard through the professional grapevine that Josh's wife had left him 6 months ago. Another casualty of infidelity, according to the whispered conversations at charity luncheons. If anyone would understand the particular sting of betrayal, it would be him. I spent 2 weeks studying Josh's routine with the methodical patience of a hunter. His gym was downtown, 3 blocks from the coffee shop where Tyler sometimes held client meetings. The same coffee shop where Josh appeared every Tuesday and Thursday at precisely 7:15 a.m., ordering black coffee and sitting by the window with his tablet. On the 3rd Thursday I was there waiting. Josh. I approached his table with carefully practiced surprise. I thought that was you. He looked up from his financial reports and for a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Recognition followed by wariness. We both knew this meeting wasn't accidental. Sarah. Good to see you. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Would you like to sit? His directness caught me off guard. No small talk about the weather or feigned surprise at the coincidence. Just an invitation to skip the pretense. I'd like that, I said, settling into the chair. I was hoping we might have a chance to talk. Josh closed his tablet and leaned back, studying me with the same analytical gaze I'd observed at board meetings. About Tyler? The question hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or retreat from. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice remained steady. Among other things, something shifted in his expression. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding. I assume you know about Megan. Hearing it confirmed so matter-of-factly should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt oddly relieved. No more pretending, no more dancing around obvious truths. I do now. The question is, what are you going to do with that information? Josh's smile was thin but genuine. The same thing you're going to do with what I tell you about Tyler's recent business decisions. That first conversation lasted 2 hours. Josh spoke with clinical precision about Tyler's increasingly erratic choices. Partnerships that made no financial sense, investments in companies that existed only on paper, sudden changes to profit-sharing agreements that benefited Tyler disproportionately. I've been documenting everything, Josh said, sliding a manila folder across the table. Initially for my own protection. Now I think it might serve a different purpose. The folder contained copies of emails, financial statements, and meeting notes that painted a picture of a man whose judgment had become fatally compromised. But more than that, it revealed something I'd never suspected. Tyler had been systematically positioning himself to cut Josh out of their most profitable ventures. He's planning to freeze you out, I realized aloud. Eventually. But first he needs to minimize his assets for the divorce proceedings. Hard to claim poverty while holding majority stakes in 3 successful companies. The casual way Josh dissected Tyler's strategy impressed me. No emotion, no wounded pride, just clear-eyed analysis of betrayal as a business problem to be solved. What do you need from me? I asked. His answer surprised me. Nothing. Yet. But when the time comes, I'll need someone who has access to Tyler's personal files. Someone he trusts completely. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Over the following weeks, I became a different person entirely. Tyler saw the same compliant wife who packed his lunches and asked about his day. But that woman was a carefully constructed mask worn by someone much more dangerous. While Tyler worked late or claimed to, I worked too. His home office became my classroom. Each document a lesson in the scope of his deception. Tyler had always handled our finances, claiming I was too emotional for such practical matters. I'd accepted this characterization because it seemed to make him happy to be needed. Now I understood it had been a strategy. The offshore account was hidden behind 3 shell companies, but Tyler's arrogance had left breadcrumbs. Bank statements tucked behind tax documents. Investment reports buried in insurance files. Account numbers written on sticky notes and forgotten in desk drawers. Each discovery felt like swallowing glass, but I photographed everything with steady hands. The beach house in Costa Rica I'd never heard of. Stock options in companies I didn't know he owned. Retirement accounts that should have been joint but were listed only in his name. By conservative estimates, Tyler had hidden nearly $2 million from me over the past 5 years. Money that should have been ours had been systematically funneled into accounts I couldn't access, properties I couldn't claim, investments that would disappear the moment he filed for divorce. But Tyler's greatest mistake was underestimating me. While he was busy covering his tracks from lawyers and judges, he never bothered hiding anything from his simple wife. Credit card statements lay open on his desk. Email accounts remained logged in on the home computer. Financial documents were filed with the casual organization of a man who believed himself untouchable. The evidence file grew thicker each night. Screenshots of email exchanges with asset managers. Photos of bank statements showing suspicious transfers. Recordings of phone calls made from the landline extension I'd learned to activate silently from the kitchen. But the most damaging discovery came accidentally. I'd been photographing a stack of investment reports when I knocked over a small wooden box on Tyler's desk. Business cards scattered across the floor. Contacts from conferences, potential clients, professional networking events. Mixed among them were cards for private investigators, divorce attorneys, and offshore banking specialists. But it was the handwritten note tucked beneath them that made my blood freeze. Handled the Cayman transfer. New account details attached. destroy after memorizing. Megan wasn't just Tyler's mistress. She was his accomplice in financial fraud, actively helping him steal our marital assets. The secretary who giggled at my phone calls had been enabling theft on a massive scale. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine and Josh's business card, finally understanding the true scope of the game being played against me. Tyler thought he was divorcing a naive housewife who would accept whatever scraps his lawyers threw her way. Instead, he was about to face someone who now understood his business better than he did, backed by a partner who had his own reasons for wanting Tyler destroyed. I picked up my phone and typed a simple message to Josh. The Cayman account. We need to talk. His response came within minutes. Tomorrow. Same place. Bring everything. As I prepared for bed, Tyler was still working late. But for the first time in months, his absence didn't hurt. I had work of my own to do, and unlike his, mine was built on truth instead of lies. The student had become the master and class was about to begin. Josh was already waiting when I arrived at the coffee shop the next morning, his usual black coffee untouched beside a spread of documents that looked deceptively casual. I slid into the seat across from him, my purse heavy with the evidence I'd gathered, a weight that felt both terrifying and empowering. The Cayman account, I said without preamble, placing a manila envelope on the table between us. Tyler's been moving money there for 3 years. Megan's been helping him. Josh opened the envelope with the careful precision of a surgeon, his expression unchanging as he reviewed the photographs and bank statements. When he finished, he looked up with something that might have been admiration. This is more than I hoped for. More than enough to trigger a fraud investigation if we need it. He paused, studying my face. The question is, what do you want to happen to them? The question hung in the air like smoke. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Or something more complex? Something that would require Tyler and Megan to understand exactly how thoroughly they'd been outplayed? I want them to destroy themselves, I said finally. I want to give them just enough rope. Josh's smile was sharp and approving. Then we're going to need Tyler to trust you completely. Can you do that? The challenge in his voice sparked something fierce inside me. Watch me. That evening, I launched my performance as the grieving wife who desperately wanted to save her marriage. Tyler was in his office again, ostensibly working, though I suspected he was texting with Megan, when I knocked softly on his door. Tyler, could we talk? He looked up with barely concealed irritation, but something in my expression must have triggered his guilt because his face softened into what I now recognized as his practiced sympathy mask. Of course, sweetheart. Come in. I sat in the chair across from his desk, the same one where I'd discovered his hidden documents just days before. Now it felt like a stage and I was about to give the performance of my life. I know things have been difficult between us lately, I began, letting my voice crack slightly. I feel like I'm losing you and I don't know how to fight for us anymore. Tyler's discomfort was palpable. He shifted in his chair, his fingers drumming against his desk in a rhythm I recognized as nervous energy. Good. Let him squirm. Sarah, He cleared his throat, reaching for words that wouldn't come easily. I've been under a lot of pressure at work. It's not about you. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that I almost marveled at his skill. How many times had he practiced these deflections? Maybe we could try counseling? I suggested, allowing tears to well in my eyes. Or we could take that vacation we've been talking about. Remember how we used to talk about Tuscany? Tyler's face went through a series of micro-expressions: panic, calculation, false hope. He was probably thinking about how a vacation would interfere with his timeline for leaving me penniless. That sounds wonderful, he said finally, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. Let me see what I can clear from my schedule. I reached across the desk and took his hand, feeling the gold wedding band that had once symbolized forever. Now it felt like evidence of a crime in progress. I love you so much, Tyler. I know we can work through this. His squeeze in return felt like a handshake with a stranger. Over the following weeks, my relationship with Josh deepened into something that surprised us both. What had started as mutual benefit, two betrayed spouses plotting revenge, evolved into genuine partnership. Our morning coffee meetings became strategy sessions, then extended conversations that ranged far beyond our shared mission. Josh possessed a quiet integrity that felt foreign after years of Tyler's flashy manipulation. Where Tyler performed honesty, Josh simply lived it. Where Tyler made grand gestures, Josh offered steady reliability. "You realize this could get complicated," Josh said one Thursday morning, his hand briefly covering mine across the table. The touch was electric and we both felt it. "Everything's already complicated," I replied, not pulling away. "The question is whether we can stay focused until this is finished." "And after it's finished?" The weight of possibility hung between us, but I forced myself to step back. Tyler and Megan thought they could have their cake and eat it too, an affair and financial security. I wouldn't make the same mistake. "After it's finished, we'll see who we are when we're not defined by what was done to us." Josh nodded, understanding the wisdom and patience. But the attraction remained, simmering beneath our professional collaboration like an ember waiting for the right moment to ignite. Meanwhile, Josh's concerns about Tyler's business judgment provided perfect cover for our investigation. Board meetings became intelligence-gathering sessions where Josh questioned Tyler's decisions with increasing boldness. "The Morrison deal doesn't make sense," Josh said during one particularly tense meeting, his voice carrying just the right note of professional skepticism. "The numbers don't add up and the timeline seems artificially rushed." Tyler's defensive response, a rambling justification that revealed more than it explained, told us everything we needed to know. He was making increasingly desperate moves to position assets before filing for divorce, and his judgment was compromised by the pressure of maintaining two deceptions simultaneously. But our most effective weapon turned out to be Tyler's own arrogance combined with Megan's eagerness to prove her usefulness. I began leaving careful breadcrumbs for Megan to find, conversations Tyler could overhear, documents left strategically visible, phone calls timed for maximum impact. The first test came when I staged a phone conversation with my sister while Tyler was in the kitchen, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. "I'm so worried about him, Linda. He's been working such long hours and I found some business documents that looked concerning. Something about offshore accounts. I don't understand finance, but the numbers seemed huge." I watched Tyler freeze in the doorway, his coffee mug suspended halfway to his lips. The panic that flashed across his face was deeply satisfying. Within 2 days, Josh reported that Tyler had suddenly developed an interest in streamlining their international holdings. Megan, Josh's sources told him, had been asking detailed questions about asset protection strategies. My false concern had triggered exactly the response we wanted. Tyler was moving money in ways that would be easy to track and harder to justify legally. The next planted seed was even more effective. During another private conversation Tyler was meant to overhear, I mentioned receiving a call from an old college friend who worked in financial forensics. "She specializes in finding hidden assets in divorce cases," I said into the phone, my voice trembling with manufactured worry. I told her I was probably being paranoid, but she said I should document everything just in case. She even offered to look over our financial records for free. Tyler's reaction was swift and predictable. He suddenly became the attentive husband again, suggesting we simplify our financial arrangements to make things easier for you to understand, sweetheart. What he was really doing was moving assets even more aggressively, each transfer creating a paper trail that Josh was carefully documenting. But the most delicious irony was watching Tyler convince himself that he was protecting his secrets while actually exposing them. Every lie he told in response to my planted fears revealed more about his strategy. Every reassurance he offered Megan, conversations I could hear through the thin walls of his office, gave us deeper insight into their timeline. "She doesn't suspect anything," I heard him tell Megan one evening. "If anything, she's becoming more dependent on me. This will be easier than I thought." As I stood in the hallway listening to my husband discuss my destruction with his mistress, I felt no pain, only cold satisfaction. They thought they were playing chess while I was learning checkers. They had no idea I'd already achieved checkmate. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, delivered by a courier who looked apologetic as I signed for them. Tyler wasn't home. He'd started staying at his downtown apartment more frequently, claiming the tension at home was affecting his work. In reality, he was probably celebrating with Megan, toasting what they believed would be their victory. I read through the filing with clinical detachment, admiring the thoroughness of Tyler's deception. According to his attorney's narrative, I was an unstable, financially irresponsible wife who had contributed nothing to our marital assets. The proposed settlement was insulting, enough to rent a modest apartment and buy groceries, but nothing approaching what I was legally entitled to after 23 years of marriage. What Tyler didn't know was that I'd been meeting with my own attorney for 6 weeks. Catherine Brennan was nothing like the theatrical divorce lawyers Tyler preferred. She was quiet, methodical, and had built her reputation dismantling the financial fortresses of cheating husbands. When I'd shown her my evidence file, her eyes had lit up with the predatory gleam of a shark sensing blood in the water. "We're going to let them think they're winning," she'd explained during our strategy session. "Your husband's arrogance will be his downfall. Men like Tyler never read the fine print when they think they're getting everything they want." Now, sitting in my kitchen with his divorce petition, I understood exactly what she meant. Tyler's lawyer had crafted agreements that looked devastating to me on the surface but contained language that would actually protect my interests once my hidden assets were revealed. Every concession I would make in court was carefully designed to benefit me in ways Tyler couldn't comprehend. The first hearing was scheduled for October 15th. I had 4 weeks to perfect my performance as the devastated, helpless wife. I started by hiring an obviously incompetent attorney named Robert Walsh, a man whose reputation for losing high-profile cases was exactly what I needed. Tyler's surveillance would reveal that I'd chosen poorly, confirming his belief that I was too emotional to fight effectively. Meanwhile, Catherine remained invisible, officially representing me only as a financial consultant, while she orchestrated the real legal strategy. The courthouse performance required every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I dressed in subdued colors, carried tissues in my purse, and let my shoulders slump with defeat as I walked past Tyler and his high-powered legal team. "Mrs. Matthews," Tyler's attorney began with practiced condescension, "your husband has been more than generous in his settlement offer. Given your lack of contribution to the marital assets and your history of financial irresponsibility." I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue, letting my voice crack as I interrupted. "I just want to be fair. Tyler worked so hard for everything we have. I don't want to be vindictive." The judge's expression softened with sympathy, while Tyler's lawyer smiled like a cat with cream. They saw exactly what I wanted them to see, a broken woman who knew she was beaten. Each concession I made felt like a small victory. When I agreed to waive my claim to Tyler's offshore holdings, I could practically see him relaxing in his chair. He had no idea that my waiver specifically excluded accounts I could prove were hidden fraudulently, a distinction that would become crucial once Josh's business investigation went public. When I tearfully accepted a smaller share of the house sale proceeds, Tyler's attorney actually patted my shoulder in mock sympathy. What they didn't realize was that my smaller share was calculated based on the house's artificially low appraisal. An appraisal that would be challenged once my real attorney revealed Tyler's attempts to devalue marital assets. But the most satisfying moment came when I signed away my rights to Tyler's legitimate business interests. The document was thick with legal language that Tyler barely glanced at, trusting his attorney's assurance that it protected all his assets. What Tyler missed, because his arrogance made him sloppy, was the clause defining legitimate business interests. Any holdings connected to fraudulent activity or financial misconduct would remain part of the marital estate. Since Josh's investigation would soon reveal Tyler's pattern of financial irresponsibility, my signature was actually protecting my claim to the most valuable assets. While the legal theater played out in court, Josh was orchestrating his own performance in the boardroom. Tyler had become so focused on the divorce proceedings that he was missing the corporate coup happening under his nose. "I'm concerned about Tyler's judgment lately," Josh said during a board meeting I learned about through carefully planted sources. "The Morrison deal was a disaster, and these offshore investments seem incredibly risky." The other partners had begun to notice Tyler's erratic behavior. His absences from important meetings. His distracted performance during client presentations. His defensive responses to legitimate questions about company finances. Josh had built a coalition slowly and carefully, never directly attacking Tyler but simply raising concerns about fiduciary responsibility and protecting shareholder interests. By the time Tyler realized what was happening, Josh had already secured the support needed to call for a comprehensive financial audit. The audit was Tyler's worst nightmare. Not only would it reveal his hidden assets, but it would expose his use of company resources to fund his personal offshore accounts. What Tyler had thought was clever asset protection would be revealed as embezzlement. But perhaps the most entertaining development was watching Megan's growing desperation as the divorce proceedings dragged on. She'd expected Tyler to be free and financially secure within weeks. Instead, she found herself dealing with a man increasingly consumed by legal battles and mounting pressure from his business partners. I watched their relationship crumble through carefully observed details. Tyler's increasing irritability when she called. The way he'd silence her when she brought up their future plans. The tension in his shoulders when she appeared at the office. Megan, for her part, became increasingly demanding. She'd built her fantasy around becoming the second Mrs. Tyler Matthews, complete with the lifestyle she'd observed from the outside. The reality of dating a man facing potential financial ruin was less appealing than she'd anticipated. Her work performance suffered as her anxiety increased. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been making mistakes, missing important calls, scheduling conflicts, even showing up late to meetings. The competent secretary who'd once been Tyler's secret weapon was becoming a liability. The breaking point came when Megan made the tactical error of confronting Tyler during a particularly stressful week. I wasn't there to witness it, but Josh's sources in the office reported the shouting match that erupted in Tyler's conference room. "When is this going to be over?" Megan had demanded, her voice carrying through the supposedly soundproof walls. "You promised me we'd be together by Christmas. Now you're saying it could take months longer." Tyler's response was cutting and brutal. "Maybe you should focus on your job instead of our personal life. I have bigger problems to deal with right now." The aftermath was swift and predictable. Megan's confidence, already shaken by weeks of uncertainty, finally cracked completely. She began making increasingly desperate attempts to secure Tyler's attention, each one pushing him further away. By November, Tyler was avoiding her calls and working from home more often, not because he wanted to spend time with me, but because he couldn't handle Megan's mounting hysteria. The woman who'd once been his escape from marital problems had become another source of stress. As I watched their affair implode under the pressure of my carefully orchestrated chaos, I felt no sympathy for either of them. They'd planned to destroy my life for their temporary pleasure. Now they were destroying each other and I had front row seats to the show. The irony was perfect. Tyler's attempt to escape one difficult woman had trapped him with an even more demanding one, while the wife he'd planned to discard was systematically dismantling everything he'd built. Justice had never tasted so sweet. The judge's gavel fell at 3:47 p.m. on a gray December afternoon, making our divorce official with the kind of bureaucratic finality that reduced 23 years of marriage to a stack of signed documents. Tyler sat beside his attorney, shoulders relaxed for the first time in months, practically radiating satisfaction as he believed he'd successfully orchestrated the theft of our shared life. I maintained my performance until the very end, dabbing at my eyes as the judge explained my generous settlement. Tyler even had the audacity to reach over and squeeze my hand in what observers would interpret as comfort but felt more like a victory lap. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, Sarah," he murmured as we gathered our paperwork, his voice pitched for the judge's ears. "I hope you'll be able to move on and find happiness." The practiced sincerity in his tone might have fooled anyone who didn't know him as well as I did. But I heard the barely contained triumph underneath, the relief of a man who thought he'd pulled off the perfect crime. "Thank you for being so understanding through all of this," I replied, my voice appropriately fragile. "I know this was hard on you too." Tyler's attorney, clearly pleased with the outcome, shook my incompetent lawyer's hand with something approaching pity. "Your client was very reasonable, Robert. This could have been much more contentious." As I walked out of that courthouse, divorce decree in hand, I felt an unexpected hollowness. Not for Tyler. That man had died for me months ago. But for the woman I'd been when I'd first walked up those same courthouse steps to get married in 1998. She'd believed in forever. She'd trusted completely. She'd never imagined that love could be weaponized. That woman was gone, and while I didn't mourn her exactly, I acknowledged her passing with something that wasn't quite grief but wasn't quite relief either. Tyler drove away in his BMW, probably heading straight to Megan's apartment to celebrate. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching the courthouse empty as other people's dramas played out in scheduled intervals. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Josh. "Phase 1 complete." His response came immediately. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. Time to finish this." Tyler spent that evening in what I can only assume was celebratory bliss. Through our still-shared Netflix account, I could see he was watching comedy specials until well past midnight. The man who'd just legally stolen from his wife was apparently in a mood to laugh. I spent the evening reviewing documents with Catherine, my real attorney, ensuring every detail was perfect for what would come next. We'd built our trap with precision and now it was time to watch it snap shut. The call came at 6:23 a.m. Sarah. Tyler's voice was sharp with panic, cutting through the early morning quiet. Did you know about this board meeting? I let confusion color my voice, still playing the role of the ex-wife who understood nothing about business. What board meeting? Josh called an emergency session. Something about financial irregularities. I don't understand why he'd. Tyler's voice cut off abruptly, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. I'm sure it's just routine business stuff, I said with practiced innocence. You always said I wouldn't understand these things. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note I'd never heard before, genuine fear. Sarah, if anyone asks you about our finances, about offshore accounts or anything like that. Tyler, you're scaring me. What's wrong? But he'd already disconnected. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 a.m. in the glass-walled conference room that had hosted so many of Tyler's triumphs. This time he walked in to find Josh seated at the head of the table, Tyler's usual position, with a stack of documents that represented months of careful investigation. Gentlemen, Josh began without preamble, we have a serious problem. Tyler took his seat with the careful composure of a man trying not to show fear, but I'd learned to read his tells over the years. The way he adjusted his tie twice. The slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his coffee. He knew something was catastrophically wrong. Over the past several months, I've been documenting concerning patterns in our company's financial management, Josh continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. What I've discovered amounts to a systematic diversion of company resources for personal gain. The presentation that followed was masterful. Josh laid out Tyler's offshore accounts, his use of company funds for personal investments, his manipulation of profit-sharing agreements. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Megan's own digital trail. These emails, sent from Tyler's secretary's company account, detail the movement of funds to accounts outside our normal business operations, Josh explained, projecting Megan's messages onto the wall screen. Ms. Patterson appears to have been instrumental in facilitating these transactions. Tyler's face went white as he read Megan's helpful messages about handling the Cayman transfer and updating the new account information. Every communication she'd thought was helping him had actually been creating evidence of their conspiracy. This is ridiculous, Tyler said, but his voice lacked conviction. These accounts are perfectly legitimate business investments. Investments that coincidentally increased dramatically during your divorce proceedings? Josh's question hung in the air like a blade. Investments that your ex-wife waived all claims to in court yesterday? The room fell silent as the other board members processed the implications. Tyler hadn't just stolen from the company, he'd orchestrated his divorce to benefit from the theft. The vote was swift and unanimous. Tyler was removed as CEO effective immediately, pending a full forensic audit and potential criminal investigation. Security would escort him from the building within the hour. As Tyler gathered his personal belongings under the watchful eyes of security guards, his phone rang constantly. Megan, no doubt, wondering why her calls to his office were being redirected. She would learn soon enough that she was unemployed too. The professional network in their industry was surprisingly small and remarkably efficient at spreading news. By lunchtime, word of Tyler's dramatic fall had reached every major firm in the city. By evening, the details of Megan's role in facilitating financial fraud were common knowledge among the executive assistants and office managers who formed the backbone of the business community. Megan's attempts to find new employment were met with polite rejections and sudden interview cancellations. Her resume, once impressive, was now toxic. Companies couldn't afford to hire someone whose loyalty could be purchased, whose ethics were so obviously compromised. The woman who had giggled at my phone calls, who had worn my dream necklace to my husband's office Christmas party, who had helped steal my future, now found herself unemployable in the only industry she knew. Within 2 weeks, Megan had quietly left the city, her social media accounts deleted, her professional connections severed. The rising star who had thought she was trading up from secretary to trophy wife had instead become a cautionary tale whispered in break rooms and boardrooms across the business district. As for Tyler, he learned that afternoon that his generous divorce settlement had been based on fraudulent financial disclosure. My waiver of offshore assets applied only to legitimate holdings, not stolen funds. My acceptance of reduced property claims was contingent on honest asset valuation, not the artificially deflated appraisals he'd arranged. Every concession I'd tearfully made in court contained language that protected me once his crimes were exposed. The man who thought he'd played me for a fool had actually signed agreements that would leave him with almost nothing once the legal dust settled. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine, watching the sunset through windows that would soon belong entirely to me. Tyler's desperate voicemails filled my phone. Pleas for understanding, promises of explanation, threats disguised as warnings. I deleted them all without listening to the end. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always swift. But when it finally arrived, it was absolutely perfect. 3 months after the board meeting that ended Tyler's career, I was in my garden when the doorbell rang. I'd been planting herbs in the raised beds I'd built where Tyler's golf putting green used to be, basil and thyme and rosemary that would actually serve a purpose beyond his weekend ego maintenance. Through the front window, I saw a figure holding what looked like flowers, and for a moment my heart skipped with an irrational fear that he'd finally snapped completely. But when I opened the door, the man standing on my porch looked nothing like the confident predator who'd planned my destruction. Tyler appeared smaller somehow, his shoulders curved inward as if he were protecting himself from invisible blows. His expensive suit hung loose on a frame that had lost weight, and his eyes carried the hollow look of someone who'd discovered that consequences were real. "Hello, Sarah." His voice was tentative, nothing like the commanding tone I'd lived with for over 2 decades. "Tyler." I kept my hand on the door, ready to close it if necessary. "What are you doing here?" He held out the flowers, grocery store roses wrapped in cellophane, not the elaborate arrangements he used to send to impress other people with his generosity. "I was hoping we could talk. I know I don't deserve it, but I've been doing a lot of thinking and I realized." "You realized what exactly?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He'd probably practiced this speech, rehearsed the right combination of remorse and charm that had worked on me so many times before. But something in my tone told him this wouldn't be like those other times. "I made mistakes," he said, the words sounding like they'd been memorized from a self-help book. "Terrible mistakes. I lost sight of what was really important, and I hurt the one person who'd always been there for me." I watched him deliver his lines with the same detached interest I might feel observing a documentary about extinct species. There was something almost pitiable about his performance. This desperate attempt to resurrect a relationship he'd murdered himself. "I know I have no right to ask," he continued, "but I was hoping we could try again. Start over. I've learned so much about myself these past few months, and I think we could have something even better than what we had before." The audacity was breathtaking. This man who'd systematically stolen from me, who'd planned to leave me penniless while he started a new life with his secretary, was now suggesting we could rebuild on the ashes of his betrayal. "Come in," I said finally, stepping aside. Tyler's face lit up with hope so genuine it was almost heartbreaking. He'd mistaken my invitation for forgiveness, not understanding that I simply wanted privacy for what came next. I led him to the living room, the same room where we'd hosted dinner parties and watched movies and argued about thermostat settings. Now it felt like a stage set for the final act of a very long play. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked, playing the hostess role one last time. "Coffee would be great. Just like you used to make it." I returned from the kitchen with 2 cups and a manila folder I'd been keeping in my desk drawer for exactly this moment. Tyler was studying our wedding photo on the mantel, his expression soft with what looked like genuine nostalgia. "I've missed this place," he said as I handed him his coffee. "I've missed us." "Have you?" I settled into my chair, the folder balanced on my lap. "Tell me, Tyler, what exactly do you miss about us?" He launched into another rehearsed monologue about partnership and trust and shared dreams. I let him talk, watching his hands gesture with practiced sincerity, noting how he avoided eye contact when he claimed to have never stopped loving me. When he finished, I opened the folder. "That's interesting," I said, pulling out the first photograph. "Because according to this email you sent to Megan in September, You were planning to finally be free of that burden by Christmas. Tyler's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips as he stared at the screenshot of his own words. And this bank statement, I continued, laying out the next piece of evidence, shows you moved $200,000 to your Cayman account the day after I asked about taking that vacation to Tuscany. Each document hit him like a physical blow. The phone recordings, the financial transfers, the business emails where he'd referred to me as the problem that needs solving. You see, Tyler, I know exactly what you missed about us. You missed having someone too trusting to question your lies. You missed having a convenient cover for your financial crimes. You missed having someone to blame when your house of cards finally collapsed. His face had gone pale, but I wasn't finished. You thought I was too stupid to see through your affair with Megan. Too emotional to understand business. Too dependent to survive without you. I leaned forward, my voice steady and cold. I was just smart enough to let you believe it. The moment of recognition in his eyes was everything I'd hoped for. The dawning understanding that every conversation, every argument, every tearful plea for our marriage had been performance. That while he'd been playing chess, I'd been playing a completely different game. How long? He whispered. How long did I know? Since March. How long did I plan this? Since the day I heard you promise Megan you'd leave me penniless. Tyler set down his coffee with shaking hands. Sarah, I never meant. You never meant to get caught. There's a difference. He tried several more times to explain, to justify, to somehow rewrite history into something more palatable. But every word only demonstrated how completely he still misunderstood what had happened between us. When he finally left, his shoulders were even more curved than when he'd arrived. The flowers lay forgotten on my coffee table, already wilting in their plastic wrapping. That evening Josh called. How did it go? He asked. Exactly as expected. He still thinks this is about hurt feelings instead of calculated justice. Are you all right? The question surprised me with its genuine concern. Over the months of our partnership, Josh had become someone I could trust completely, a rare gift after Tyler's betrayal. But we'd both been careful not to let our attraction complicate the mission. I'm perfect, I said and meant it. What about you? Ready for your new life as CEO? Josh had officially taken control of the company the week before, with unanimous board support. Tyler's removal had actually strengthened the business, freeing it from the toxic decision-making that had been slowly destroying it. It feels right, he said. But I wanted to ask you something. I'm moving to the Boston office to oversee the expansion there. I was wondering if you'd like to come with me. The invitation hung between us, loaded with possibilities and complications. 6 months ago I might have said yes without hesitation, trading one relationship for another. But the woman Tyler's betrayal had created was smarter than that. Josh, I said gently, we're both still figuring out who we are without our old lives. Maybe we should do that separately before we try to build something new together. His laugh was warm and understanding. I was hoping you'd say that. It means you've really learned to trust yourself. I have. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based on what I want instead of what someone else expects from me. We agreed to stay in touch, to let whatever might develop between us happen naturally rather than forcing it. Josh was a good man, honest in ways Tyler had never been, but I needed to discover who I was when I wasn't defined by any man at all. 6 months later I was grocery shopping when I saw her. Megan stood in the frozen food aisle, her cart half full of budget items and her appearance significantly less polished than I remembered. She looked older, more tired, wearing clothes that suggested either a different lifestyle or different circumstances. Our eyes met for a moment across the freezer cases. I waited for anger, satisfaction, some emotional response to seeing the woman who'd helped orchestrate my betrayal. Instead, I felt only mild curiosity about how her story had unfolded. She looked away first, pushing her cart quickly toward the checkout lanes. I continued my shopping, picking out ingredients for the dinner party I was hosting that weekend, a gathering of new friends I'd made through pottery classes and volunteer work. Tyler's final text had come 2 weeks before the grocery store encounter. I never meant to hurt you. I hope you can forgive me someday. I'd read it, felt nothing, and deleted it without responding. Not because I was angry, but because Tyler had become irrelevant to my life in the most complete way possible. I simply didn't think about him anymore. The woman who'd once measured her worth by her husband's approval had evolved into someone who trusted her own judgment completely. The future stretched ahead like an open road, and for the first time in decades, I was the only one deciding which direction to drive. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Sarah revealed that evidence folder to Tyler, watching him realize every move he made was anticipated and countered. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Natalie Mitchell, 24, and I just witnessed my parents give my sister Allison a brand new Tesla for her Yale graduation. Everyone was cheering as she screamed with excitement, jumping up and down in our perfectly manicured front yard. Meanwhile, I stood on the sidelines clutching my small gift box, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. The same knot I felt my entire life growing up in Allison's shadow. I never expected what would happen next when I opened my own gift. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment where you're watching from, hit subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked in your family, and let's get into this emotional roller coaster that changed everything between me and my perfect sister. To understand why that moment hit me so hard, you need to know about our family dynamic. I've always been the second choice, the afterthought in the Mitchell household. My dad, James, is a renowned cardiovascular surgeon at Boston Memorial. He's brilliant, respected, and has impossibly high standards. My mom, Karen, was Miss Massachusetts 1995 before becoming one of the top-selling real estate agents in our county. They're both driven, successful, and have always expected nothing less from their daughters. The problem? Only one of us seemed capable of meeting those expectations. And it wasn't me. Allison came into this world seemingly perfect. She was walking at 9 months, speaking in full sentences by age 2, and reading chapter books by kindergarten. She has our mom's striking beauty, tall, naturally blonde, with piercing blue eyes, and our dad's analytical mind. Everything came easily to her. Straight A's without studying, athletic trophies, student government, popularity. She's the kind of person other people hate to love because it's impossible not to adore her. I, on the other hand, struggled from the beginning. School was a battlefield for me. Words jumped around the page when I tried to read. Numbers refused to make sense. My teachers constantly told my parents, Natalie isn't applying herself or she needs to focus more. But the truth wouldn't come out until my freshman year of college when I finally got diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. 20 years of struggling, of feeling stupid, of watching disappointment flash across my parents' faces, all because they never bothered to have me properly tested. She's just not academically inclined like Allison, they'd say. She's more creative. That was their polite way of saying I wasn't smart enough. The favoritism showed in countless ways throughout our childhood. When Allison turned 16, she got a brand new Jeep with a big red bow in the driveway. For my 16th, I received a bus pass and access to Mom's old sedan on weekends if I filled the tank. Allison's birthdays featured elaborate parties with professional decorations, catering, and dozens of guests. My parents would often schedule my birthday celebrations on different days because they conflicted with Allison's competitions or events. One year, they completely forgot until my grandmother Dorothy called to wish me happy birthday and realized no one had planned anything. Speaking of Grandma Dorothy, she was my savior growing up. My mom's mother, she lived about an hour away in a cozy cottage filled with books and art. She was a retired art teacher who recognized my creative abilities when no one else did. While my parents attended every single one of Allison's soccer games, debate tournaments, and award ceremonies, it was Dorothy who showed up to my art exhibitions and school plays. She'd sit in the front row, beaming with pride, while my parents sent texts about being tied up with work or at Allison's state finals. Your mind works differently, Natalie, and that's your superpower, Dorothy would tell me. The world needs people who see things from unexpected angles. She was the one who encouraged me to pursue graphic design, the perfect blend of creativity and technology that somehow made sense to my scattered brain. I flourished in my college design program, graduating with honors 3 years ago, though my parents barely noticed. They were busy helping Allison prepare for Yale Law School interviews that weekend. They promised to make it to my ceremony, but called that morning with apologies. Allison had an important tennis match they couldn't miss. After graduation, I didn't move back home like Allison did during her breaks. Instead, I rented a tiny studio apartment downtown and started freelancing while working at a local design agency. I built my portfolio, won a regional design award last year, and recently landed a junior art director position at a boutique agency. My parents still refer to my career as my computer drawing hobby and regularly ask when I'm going to get a real job, like Allison's upcoming position at a prestigious law firm. I've learned to find validation elsewhere, from satisfied clients, from my growing Instagram following where I share my designs, from my tight group of friends who understand my worth. But deep down, that little girl who just wanted her parents' approval still lives inside me, still hopes that someday they'll see me the way they see Allison. Despite everything, I don't hate my sister. That's the complicated part. Allison has always been kind to me, if somewhat oblivious to the imbalance in our family. She's generous, thoughtful, and genuinely supportive of my work when she remembers to ask about it. I sometimes wonder if she notices the disparity in how we're treated, but she's been so conditioned to being the center of attention that it probably seems normal to her. So when her Yale Law School graduation approached, I pushed down all those complicated feelings and prepared to play my supporting role once again in the Allison Mitchell show. 3 weeks before Allison's graduation, I requested time off from work. My boss, Julia, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned needing Thursday and Friday for my sister's graduation festivities. 2 days for a graduation? She asked. I explained that my parents had planned an elaborate celebration at their house following the actual ceremony. It's a whole thing, I said with a forced smile. Yale law, you know? Julia didn't know, but she approved my time off anyway. The week before the event, my mom called and asked if I could come over early to help decorate. You're so good with that artistic stuff, she said, which was her way of acknowledging my design skills without actually complimenting my career. Sure, Mom, I agreed, ignoring the familiar pang of frustration. What time do you need me? Could you come Wednesday evening and stay over? The caterers arrive at 10 a.m. Thursday, and we need everything looking perfect before they set up. Of course they hired caterers. When I graduated, we had a small dinner at an Italian restaurant where my dad spent half the evening answering work calls. Wednesday night, I arrived with my overnight bag and design supplies. Mom had ordered mountains of blue and white decorations, Yale colors, and wanted me to work my magic, arranging everything. I spent hours creating elegant centerpieces, hanging tasteful banners, and arranging photo displays of Allison throughout her academic journey. While setting up the photos, I couldn't help but notice the disproportionate documentation of our lives. There were entire albums dedicated to Allison's debate team victories, sports tournaments, and academic achievements. Meanwhile, my graduation photos were confined to a single frame on the bookshelf, partially hidden behind a trophy Allison won for equestrian competition when she was 12. As I worked, I overheard my parents in the kitchen discussing Allison's big surprise. Do you think the bow is big enough? Mom asked. I want it to look dramatic when we reveal it. The dealership said it's their largest bow, Dad replied. And the custom interior upgrades should be finished tomorrow morning. They're delivering it around noon, and they'll park it around the corner until we're ready. My stomach dropped as I realized they were talking about a car, and not just any car. They were giving Allison a Tesla. I thought about my own graduation gift, a $200 gift card to a professional clothing store so I could dress appropriately for job interviews. Despite this revelation, I continued working late into the night on a special gift I'd created for Allison, a beautifully designed photo collage featuring moments from her law school journey. I'd secretly contacted some of her classmates for photos she wasn't in, capturing the behind-the-scenes of her law school experience. I'd spent weeks on it, using my design skills to create something meaningful that showed I was proud of her despite our complicated relationship. But I wanted to give her something tangible too. The next morning, while finishing the decorations, I slipped out to a nearby antique store. My budget was tight, but I wanted to find something special. After an hour of searching, I discovered a vintage silver locket with a tiny Yale bulldog engraved on it. Inside, I placed a tiny photo of our grandmother Dorothy, who had always encouraged both of us to follow our dreams. The locket cost nearly half my rent, but seeing it, I felt a spark of hope that maybe this gift would show my parents that thoughtfulness mattered more than extravagance. That afternoon, I called my best friend Mia for moral support. "They're giving her a Tesla," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "A Tesla? For graduation? That's insane," Mia replied. "What did they give you again?" "A gift card to and Taylor." Wow. Are you okay?" I sighed, looking around at the perfect decorations I'd spent hours creating. "I'm used to it. I keep hoping something will change, you know? That they'll eventually see me." "You should say something, Nat. This has been going on forever." "And ruin Allison's big day? I can't be that person." I paused. "Besides, it's not her fault. She doesn't control what they give her." "No, but she benefits from it. Has she ever once acknowledged the difference in how you're treated?" I didn't have an answer for that. Had Allison ever noticed? Had she ever felt uncomfortable with the blatant favoritism? I wasn't sure. The morning of the party, I woke up early in my childhood bedroom, which had been converted into a home office the month after I moved out for college. Meanwhile, Allison's room remained perfectly preserved, waiting for her visits home. I spent extra time on my appearance, applying makeup carefully and styling my dark hair into soft waves. I chose a modest blue dress that had cost me 2 days freelance work. Looking in the mirror, I reminded myself that this day wasn't about me or my feelings. It was about celebrating Allison's achievement. I rehearsed my smile in the mirror, determined to be genuinely happy for my sister despite the knot of resentment and hurt that had taken up permanent residence in my chest. I loved Allison. I was proud of her. I just wished, for once, that someone would be equally proud of me. By noon, our family's colonial-style home was transformed into something out of a graduation special on HGTV. The caterers had set up elegant buffet tables on the patio. Bartenders prepared signature cocktails named after Yale law courses. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the living room. Everything was perfect, just as my parents demanded. Guests began arriving at 1 o'clock, extended family, my parents' country club friends, Allison's classmates, and her professors who had made the trip from New Haven. I stationed myself near the door, greeting people with a smile and directing them to the bar and appetizers. "You must be so proud of your sister," everyone said, as if that was my only identity, Allison's sister. Uncle Tyler spotted me refilling the ice bucket and came over, drink in hand. "There's my other niece. How's that computer drawing hobby going?" "It's graphic design, Uncle Tyler, and it's my career, not a hobby. I was actually promoted to junior art director last month." "That's nice, sweetie. Is that something you can make a living from these days?" Before I could answer, he spotted someone more interesting across the room. "Excuse me, I need to say hello to Dr. Friedman." I swallowed my frustration and continued helping with hosting duties. Mom was too busy showing off Allison's law school memorabilia to notice that I was handling the guest overflow. Dad was deep in conversation with Allison's constitutional law professor, probably discussing her brilliant thesis paper. At 2:30, Allison arrived to thunderous applause. She looked radiant in a white dress, her honor cords and stole draped perfectly around her shoulders. She laughed as everyone swarmed her, accepting hugs and congratulations with practiced grace. "There's my girl," Dad boomed, breaking away from his conversation to embrace her. "The youngest graduate in her class and top 3%. Allison beamed, soaking in the adoration. When she spotted me hovering near the kitchen door, she broke away from her admirers and came over to hug me. "The place looks amazing, Nat. Did you do all this?" I nodded. "Congratulations, Allie. I'm really proud of you." "Thanks," she said, squeezing my arm. "I couldn't have survived those all-nighters without your care packages. Those design-your-own-brief templates you made saved my life during finals." For a brief moment, I felt seen. But then Mom swooped in, pulling Allison away to meet the Hendersons, who came all the way from Providence just for you. As lunch transitioned to afternoon cocktails, Dad clinked his glass for attention. Everyone quieted as he launched into an emotional speech about Allison's achievements. From the moment she was born, we knew Allison was destined for greatness, he began, his voice thick with pride. Her first-grade teacher told us she had never seen a child grasp reading so quickly. Her high school principal said she was the most promising student to walk those halls in 30 years. He continued for 15 minutes, chronicling Allison's journey from precocious child to Yale law graduate. He mentioned her clerkship offers, the prestigious firms fighting to hire her, and how she was considering a future in politics. A senator, or maybe more, someday, he said with a wink that made the crowd murmur appreciatively. Not once did he mention his other daughter. Not once did he acknowledge my recent design award or promotion. I was invisible, as always. After the speech, Mom announced it was time for gifts. My stomach tightened as Dad asked everyone to follow him outside. I hung back, clutching my small gift box and the framed photo collage I'd created. Everyone, we wanted to give Allison something special to commemorate this achievement, Dad announced when the crowd had gathered on the front lawn. He pulled out a small remote with a flourish. Something to start her professional life with the success she deserves. He pressed the button, and from around the corner came the gleaming white Tesla Model S, sporting an enormous blue bow. The car purred up the driveway as everyone gasped and applauded. Allison's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "It's yours, sweetheart," Mom said, handing her the key fob. "Fully loaded, custom interior, and we've paid the insurance for the first year." Allison screamed with excitement, jumping up and down before hugging our parents fiercely. Everyone crowded around the vehicle, oohing and awing over its features. I stood alone on the porch steps, still holding my small gifts, feeling like I was watching the scene through thick glass. "It's something else, isn't it?" came a soft voice beside me. I turned to find Grandma Dorothy, who had arrived late and slipped in unnoticed. "It's a Tesla," I said flatly. "For graduation." Dorothy squeezed my hand. "Some gifts come with strings, Natalie. Remember that." I didn't understand what she meant, but her presence steadied me as we watched Allison giving her friends tours of her new car's interior. After about 20 minutes of Tesla admiration, the party moved back inside for cake and coffee. As the excitement over the car settled, Mom suddenly remembered my existence. "Oh," she exclaimed, a bit too loudly. "Natalie has something for you too, Allison." All eyes turned to me, and I felt my cheeks burn as I stepped forward with my gifts. The room had an uncomfortable energy, as if everyone was aware of the stark contrast between the Tesla outside and whatever modest offering I held in my hands. "It's not much," I said softly, hating how apologetic I sounded. Allison smiled genuinely as she took the packages. "You didn't have to get me anything, Nat." She opened the framed collage first, her eyes widening as she took in the dozens of carefully arranged photos capturing her law school journey. "Natalie, this is incredible," she said, tracing the design with her finger. "How did you get all these pictures?" "Some of these moments. I didn't even know anyone was photographing them." "I reached out to your friends," I explained. "I wanted to capture the whole experience, not just the formal stuff." Several of Allison's classmates crowded around, pointing and laughing at memories captured in the collage. I felt a small glow of satisfaction at their reaction. Next, Allison opened the small jewelry box containing the vintage locket. She gasped softly as she lifted it out. "It's from that antique store on Maple Street," I said. "The bulldog is hand-engraved. And look inside." Allison carefully opened the locket to find the tiny photo of our grandmother. Her eyes met mine, and for once, I saw true understanding there. "Because she always believed in both of us," Allison said quietly. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Natalie." "This is beautiful." She hugged me briefly before Mom redirected everyone's attention to the elaborate cake being wheeled in. From across the room, I noticed Grandma Dorothy watching us with an unreadable expression. She caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod, as if confirming something to herself. As the cake was being served, Dad suddenly called for attention again. "I almost forgot. We have one more surprise." He looked around the room. "Where's Natalie?" Surprised at being acknowledged, I raised my hand awkwardly. "I'm here." Dad walked over and handed me a small envelope. "This is for you too," he said, though his tone lacked the enthusiasm he'd shown for Allison's gift. It felt more like an afterthought. The room fell into curious silence as I stared at the envelope. It was simple white stationery with my name written in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Confused, I looked up at Dorothy, who nodded encouragingly. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single key attached to a handmade ceramic keychain and a folded note. The keychain was painted with a small lighthouse, something I'd loved since childhood. I unfolded the note and began to read, "My dearest Natalie, some gifts aren't meant to be shared on someone else's special day, but your father insisted on giving you this now. Inside this envelope is the key to your graduation present, 3 years late, but perhaps right on time. When you graduated college, I watched you walk across that stage alone while your parents attended Allison's tennis match. I made a decision that day that has taken until now to fulfill. The key opens the front door to Lighthouse Cottage on Maple Cove, just down the shore from my place. It's yours, Natalie, your own home, your own studio, your own place in this world where your creativity can flourish without shadows. Your parents may not have noticed your graduation, but I did. Your parents may not understand your gifts, but I do. Come see it tomorrow. We'll talk then. All my love. Grandma Dorothy. I looked up from the letter in shock, my eyes immediately finding my grandmother's across the room. She smiled gently, nodding once in confirmation. A house. My grandmother had bought me a house for my graduation. 3 years ago. The memory of my college graduation hit me like a physical blow. I had walked across the stage with highest honors in graphic design. The ceremony had been on a beautiful May morning, the kind of perfect spring day that feels like a gift itself. I had scanned the audience, hoping against hope to see my family despite their last-minute cancellation. The seats I'd reserved remained empty throughout the ceremony. I had told myself it didn't matter. I had celebrated with friends afterward, posed for photos with my professors who praised my portfolio, and pretended the ache in my chest was just excitement for the future. Later that evening, I received a text from Mom with a gift card code for Ann Taylor and a message for job interviews. Make sure to get something conservative. Congratulations, honey. And all this time, my grandmother had been planning something else entirely. Something that recognized not just my achievement, but my identity, my needs, my dreams. The room had gone completely silent as people realized something significant was happening. I looked up to see everyone staring at me, including my parents, who appeared confused rather than pleased. "Dorothy?" Mom said, her voice unnaturally high. "What is this about?" My grandmother stood and crossed the room to stand beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "It's about time," she said simply. "I don't understand," my mother said, looking between me and Grandma Dorothy. "What cottage? What is this about?" The party guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Allison stepped forward, genuine concern on her face. "Natalie? What's going on?" My hands were still shaking as I held the key. "Grandma bought me a house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "For my college graduation. 3 years ago." My father frowned. "Mother, you should have discussed this with us. Real estate is a serious investment, and Natalie isn't ready for James," Dorothy interrupted firmly. "Natalie is 24 years old, has a successful career, and has been supporting herself since graduation. When exactly would she be ready, in your estimation?" The pointed question hung in the air. Several guests suddenly became very interested in their cake. "Perhaps we should discuss this later," my mother suggested tightly, glancing around at the audience. "No," Dorothy replied. "I think now is perfect. We're celebrating academic achievement and new beginnings, aren't we?" She turned to the gathered guests. 3 years ago, Natalie graduated with highest honors in graphic design. Neither of her parents attended her ceremony because they were at Allison's tennis match. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. My father's face reddened. "That's hardly fair, Dorothy. We I purchased Lighthouse Cottage the week after Natalie's graduation. Dorothy continued as if he hadn't spoken. It's a small place on Maple Cove, about a mile down the shore from my house. It needs some work, but it has good bones and an exceptional north-facing studio space, with the kind of natural light artists dream about. She turned to me, her eyes soft with years of understanding. I've been waiting for the right moment to give it to you. When James insisted on giving you your gift today, I decided it was time. You've known about this? I asked my father, confusion swirling through me. He shifted uncomfortably. Your grandmother mentioned it last week when we were discussing Allison's gift. We thought it would be efficient to handle both at once. Of course. They hadn't wanted to bother with a separate occasion for me. Can I see it? I asked Dorothy, ignoring my parents. Tomorrow, she promised. It needs work, but I think you'll see its potential immediately. Allison stepped forward, her expression a mix of confusion and genuine happiness. Nat, that's amazing! Your own place by the ocean? With a studio. She hugged me impulsively. We should celebrate both of us. Her sincerity caught me off guard, and despite everything, I hugged her back. When we separated, I saw something new in her eyes, a dawning awareness, perhaps, of the imbalance that had always existed between us. The party resumed its rhythm, though with a different energy. Several guests made a point of coming to congratulate me about the cottage, asking about my design work with seemingly genuine interest. My parents circulated stiffly, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Later, as people began to leave, Dorothy pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the garden. I should explain more about the cottage, she said. I've been watching your career blossom these past few years. Those Instagram posts of your designs, the agency work you share, the award you won last fall, I see it all. My throat tightened. You follow my design account? Of course I do. I've watched you build your portfolio and develop your style. You have extraordinary talent, Natalie. But you need space to truly flourish. Not just physical space, but emotional space away from. She gestured vaguely toward the house where my parents were saying goodbye to guests. The cottage isn't perfect, she continued. The kitchen needs updating, and the bathroom is straight out of 1975. But the bones are good, and that studio space. She smiled. The previous owner was a watercolorist. She designed that room specifically for creating art. North-facing windows, built-in storage, even a small deck overlooking the water. I could barely process what she was saying. I don't know what to say, Grandma. It's too much. It's not too much. It's exactly right. She took my hands in hers. I've watched you shrink yourself in this house for years. I've seen you adjust your dreams to avoid disapproval, hide your accomplishments to keep the peace. You need a place where you can spread out, be loud, make mistakes, create without judgment. Tears filled my eyes as her words hit home. How did you know? Because I see you, Natalie. I've always seen you. She squeezed my hands. The cottage is yours, no strings attached. Make it your sanctuary. For the first time that day, perhaps for the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. Not as Allison's sister or James and Karen's disappointing daughter, but as Natalie Mitchell, graphic designer, artist, person of value. Thank you, I whispered, the words entirely inadequate for what I was feeling. Dorothy smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I'll pick you up and show you your home. Home. My home. The concept was almost too big to grasp. As the last guests departed, I noticed Allison standing by her new Tesla, watching our grandmother drive away. She turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. So, she said, a cottage by the ocean. That's pretty amazing. I nodded, still processing everything. I didn't know about your graduation, she said suddenly. That Mom and Dad missed it for my tennis match. You never said anything. I shrugged, uncomfortable with her sudden awareness. It wasn't your fault. But I should have known. She looked troubled, as if seeing our family dynamics clearly for the first time. I want to see this cottage. Maybe I could help you fix it up this summer before I start at the firm in September. Her offer surprised me. You'd want to do that? Of course. She smiled tentatively. What are sisters for? Perhaps this day of gifts had given us both something unexpected. Allison, a new perspective, and me, a glimmer of hope that our relationship could evolve into something more balanced. As we walked back inside, I clutched my cottage key, feeling its weight and promise in my palm. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning in more ways than one. The artificial cheerfulness that had sustained my parents through the end of the party collapsed as soon as the last guest departed. My mother began aggressively gathering dirty plates, her movements sharp with suppressed anger. Dad poured himself a scotch, his back rigid as he stared out the window. Allison and I exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the storm brewing. She began helping Mom with cleanup while I started breaking down the decorations I'd spent hours arranging. That was completely inappropriate, Mom finally said, slamming a stack of plates onto the counter. Dorothy had no right to hijack Allison's special day with her statement. Mom, it's fine, Allison said quickly. I don't mind sharing the spotlight. It's cool that Natalie got such an amazing gift. That's not the point, Dad interjected, turning from the window. Your grandmother deliberately created a scene to make us look bad. I stopped folding the banner I was holding. Is that what you think happened? That this was about making me look bad? What else would you call it? Mom demanded. Announcing in front of everyone that we missed your graduation? As if we had a choice. Allison needed us that day. Something snapped inside me, a lifetime of swallowing hurt, of making myself small, of accepting that I would always come second. She had a tennis match, I said quietly. A tennis match versus my college graduation. Do you have any idea how that felt? To walk across that stage knowing every other graduate had someone cheering for them, but my seats were empty? Don't be dramatic, Natalie, Dad dismissed. You've always been oversensitive. We sent you a gift card. A gift card. I laughed hollowly. $200 to and Taylor while you just gave Allison a Tesla. Do you even hear yourselves? My mother crossed her arms defensively. Allison graduated from Yale Law School. You can't possibly expect equivalent gifts for a state university graphic design degree. Each word landed like a physical blow. Allison gasped. Mom, that's not fair. Life isn't fair, Dad said firmly. Some people achieve at higher levels than others and are rewarded accordingly. That's reality. The reality, I said, my voice shaking, is that you've favored Allison my entire life. Her elaborate birthday parties while mine were forgotten. Her achievements celebrated while mine were ignored. Her needs prioritized while mine were dismissed. That's ridiculous, Mom protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. Is it? When I was struggling in school, begging for help because I couldn't understand why reading was so difficult for me, what did you do? You compared me to Allison. You told me to try harder. You scheduled extra tutoring for me with high school students who had no idea how to help me. I turned to my father. And you, Dad? You called me lazy. Said I wasn't applying myself. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? To be trying her absolute hardest and still be told it's not enough? Natalie, he began, but I wasn't finished. It took until college for a professor to recognize the signs and suggest I get tested. Dyslexia and ADHD, Dad. Actual neurological conditions that explained everything I'd been struggling with. And when I called to tell you the diagnosis, do you remember what you said? He looked away, jaw tight. You said, well, I suppose that explains why you're not like your sister. Not, I'm sorry we missed this. Not, how can we help you now? Just confirmation that I would never measure up to Allison. The room fell silent except for my ragged breathing. Allison stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. I didn't know, she whispered. Natalie, I swear I didn't understand how bad it was. How could you? I replied, not unkindly. You were just living your life. The problem was never you, Allie. Don't put this all on us, my mother said, though her voice lacked conviction. We provided everything you needed. Private schools, college tuition, but not support, I interrupted. Not validation. Not love that didn't feel conditional on achievement. Of course we love you. Dad exploded. This victim narrative you're constructing is completely unfair. We're proud of what you've accomplished given your limitations. The word hung in the air like poison. Limitations, I repeated softly. There it is. You've never seen my differences as just that, differences. You've always seen them as deficiencies. Dad, that's horrible, Allison said, her voice breaking. Natalie is incredibly talented. Have you even looked at her design portfolio? The clients she's landed? The awards she won last year. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm sure she's very creative. That's always been her area. She's brilliant, Allison insisted. Do you know she created custom templates that half my law school study group used for our briefs and case summaries? Professor Abernathy asked where we got them because they were so effective at organizing complex information visually. I stared at my sister, surprised by her vehement defense and the specific knowledge of my work. You knew about that? I asked. Of course I did. I've been bragging about my genius designer sister for years. She turned back to our parents. But you wouldn't know that because you never ask about Natalie when you call me. It's always about my accomplishments, my future, my potential. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is? My parents looked genuinely startled by this new perspective. What are you talking about? Mom asked. You've always thrived on achievement. Because it was the only way to get your attention. Allison exclaimed. Do you think I enjoyed the pressure? The constant expectation of perfection? The subtle message that my worth depended on my next accomplishment. She walked over to stand beside me, our shoulders touching in silent solidarity. I'm not the villain in Natalie's story, she continued more quietly. But I've benefited from your favoritism my whole life, and I never said anything. That makes me complicit. My father ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older than his years. This is absurd. We've given both of you every advantage. No, Dad, I said gently. You gave Allison every advantage. I succeeded despite you, not because of you. That's enough, my mother snapped, tears in her eyes. I won't stand here and be accused of being a terrible parent when I've dedicated my life to this family. I'm not saying you're terrible parents, I clarified. I'm saying you've been unequal parents. There's a difference. And what do you want us to do about it now? Dad demanded. You're adults. What's done is done. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm despite the emotional storm we were navigating. I want you to hear me. Really hear me, maybe for the first time. I want you to recognize that your treatment of us has been unbalanced and that it's caused real pain. I want you to try to see me, not as a disappointment or a problem to be managed, but as your daughter who has built a life and career to be proud of, even without your support. My words hung in the air, heavy with decades of unspoken truth. After a long moment, my mother whispered, I didn't know you felt this way. You never asked, I replied simply. We stood in silence, the four of us caught in a moment of painful clarity. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the perfect lawn where Allison's Tesla gleamed in the golden light. Finally, Allison spoke. I want us to do better. All of us. She looked at our parents. Starting with acknowledging what Natalie has said instead of defending yourselves. My father opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I need time to process this, he said finally. But I hear you, Natalie. I'm not promising I agree with everything you've said, but I hear you. It wasn't an apology or an admission, but it was something. A crack in the wall of denial that had stood between us for so long. I'm going to stay at Mia's tonight, I said, suddenly exhausted by the emotional confrontation. And tomorrow I'm going to see the cottage with Grandma Dorothy. Can I come? Allison asked tentatively. To see the cottage, I mean. If that's okay with you. I nodded, touched by her request. I'd like that. As I packed my overnight bag, I felt lighter despite the difficult conversation. For years, I had carried the weight of unspoken hurt and resentment. Giving voice to those feelings, being heard, even reluctantly, had loosened something inside me. The cottage key sat on my dresser, catching the last rays of sunlight. It represented more than property. It was independence, recognition, a space to define myself outside the shadow of family expectations. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter, not just a new home, but perhaps the beginning of new family dynamics based on truth rather than comfortable fictions. One week after the graduation party, I stood on the weathered deck of Lighthouse Cottage, watching waves roll gently onto the shore below. The salty breeze carried the scent of blooming beach roses that grew wild along the property line. In the distance, a small sailboat tacked against the wind, its white sail bright against the blue horizon. I still can't believe this is mine, I said to myself, running my hand along the sun-warmed railing. The cottage was exactly as Dorothy had described, small but solid, in need of updates but full of character and potential. The 1970s kitchen with its avocado-colored appliances made me laugh, and the pink bathroom was truly a sight to behold, but the bones of the place were perfect. Hardwood floors throughout, a river stone fireplace, windows everywhere to capture the coastal light. And the studio space. My heart had nearly stopped when Dorothy first showed me the north-facing room with its wall of windows and vaulted ceiling. Built-in shelves and drawers lined one wall, perfect for organizing design materials. A previous owner had installed excellent track lighting. The deck outside the studio offered an unobstructed view of the cove, ideal for breaks when my eyes needed rest from the screen. I'd spent the week shuttling between my apartment and the cottage, bringing carloads of essentials and working remotely from the card table I'd set up temporarily in the studio. My apartment lease would end in 2 months, giving me time to properly move and make necessary repairs to the cottage. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Allison's Tesla coming up the winding driveway. She had texted earlier asking if she could stop by with lunch. Our relationship had shifted since the confrontation with our parents, not dramatically, but noticeably. There was a new honesty between us, fragile but promising. This view is incredible. Allison called as she climbed out of her car carrying a picnic basket. No wonder you've been practically living here all week. I smiled and met her at the steps. Wait until you see inside. It's a 1970s time capsule. Perfect for a designer, she teased. You can go wild updating it. We set up lunch on the deck, gourmet sandwiches, fruit, and iced tea from the cafe in town. As we ate, Allison took in the panoramic ocean view. I get it now, she said quietly. Get what? Why Grandma Dorothy chose this place for you. It's like she bottled your personality and turned it into a house. She gestured around us. Creative, peaceful, a little bit separate from everything else, but with this amazing perspective. I was touched by her observation. I've been thinking about that too. She knew what I needed before I did. Allison picked at her sandwich. I've been doing a lot of thinking this week about everything. Our family, growing up, how different things were for us. I nodded, giving her space to continue. I honestly never saw it clearly before, she admitted. I mean, I knew Mom and Dad were harder on you about grades and stuff, but I thought that was just because school came easier to me. I didn't understand about the dyslexia and ADHD. It wasn't your responsibility to understand, I said. You were just a kid too. But I should have noticed more as we got older. She met my eyes directly. I should have said something when they missed your graduation for my tennis match. That was wrong, Nat. So wrong. I shrugged, uncomfortable with her intensity. Water under the bridge now. No, it's not. Because it's part of a pattern that's still happening. She set down her sandwich. Mom called me yesterday to ask if I'd talked sense into you yet. What does that mean? Apparently they think your outburst at the party was just you being dramatic and jealous of my Tesla. She rolled her eyes. They wanted me to convince you to apologize for ruining my special day. I felt a familiar sinking sensation. And what did you say? I told them they owed you an apology, not the other way around. She smiled at my surprised expression. I also said if they couldn't acknowledge the validity of your feelings, they might lose their relationship with both daughters. I stared at her, stunned by this unexpected advocacy. You said that to them? I did. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Look, I'm not claiming I'm suddenly perfect. I've benefited from their favoritism my whole life, and I'm sure I've been blind to my own privilege in our family. But I want to do better. I want us to have a real relationship, not the weird competitive dynamic they created. I'd like that too, I said softly. After lunch, I gave Allison a proper tour of the cottage. She exclaimed appropriately over the pink bathroom, "It's so bad it's almost good," and immediately began brainstorming renovation ideas. "What if we knocked out this wall to open up the kitchen?" she suggested, her law school precision suddenly channeled into home improvement. "And these cabinets could be repainted instead of replaced to save money." I asked, raising an eyebrow. She looked embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm overstepping. It's your place." "No, I assured her. "I could use the help, honestly. And the company." Her face brightened. "Really?" "Because I have 6 weeks before I start at the firm, and I need something to do besides panic about my future. Plus, manual labor might be good for my overachieving brain." We spent the afternoon measuring rooms and making lists of materials. Allison's methodical approach complemented my creative vision, and for the first time, our different strengths felt like an asset rather than a comparison point. As evening approached, Allison reluctantly said she needed to head back to the city. At the door, she hesitated. "Mom and Dad want to come see the cottage," she said. "They asked me to feel you out about it." I tensed. "I'm not ready for that." "That's what I figured. I'll tell them you need time." She hugged me quickly. "This is your space, Nat. You get to decide who enters it and when." After she left, I called Dorothy to thank her again for the life-changing gift. "I knew you'd make it yours quickly," she said when I described my renovation plans. "You've always had a gift for transformation, seeing the potential in things others might overlook." "I wish Mom and Dad could see that," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "They're products of their generation and upbringing, Natalie. They value what they understand, traditional markers of success, clear paths, measurable outcomes. Your creativity, your different way of thinking, these things are beautiful but harder for them to quantify." "That doesn't excuse how they've treated me." "No, it doesn't," she agreed. "But understanding might help you set appropriate expectations. They may never fully grasp your gifts or give you the specific validation you've wanted. The question is whether you can build a relationship with them within those limitations." Her wisdom, as always, hit home. "I'm still figuring that out." "Take your time," she advised. "Meanwhile, focus on creating your sanctuary. Healing doesn't happen all at once." That evening, I set up my drafting table by the studio windows. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold and pink, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I unpacked my favorite pens and notebook, then sat down to sketch some initial design concepts for the cottage renovation. As darkness fell, I lit a candle and continued working, ideas flowing freely in this space that felt so intrinsically mine. No pressure to conform, no voices questioning my choices, no need to make myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. Just me, my creativity, and the sound of waves breaking on the shore below. The cottage would need work, lots of it. The bathroom would need complete renovation, the kitchen updating, walls repainted, floors refinished. But the foundation was solid. The structure was sound. Like me, it had good bones and untapped potential. I opened my laptop and began researching coastal-inspired color palettes, my mind already transforming the space into a reflection of my aesthetic. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn approval or meet someone else's standards. I was creating purely for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison, thinking about paint colors. "What if we did a soft sage green for the kitchen? Also, I'm bringing power tools this weekend." I smiled, realizing that healing came in unexpected forms. The sister who had unintentionally overshadowed me for years was now offering to help me build something new. The relationship was evolving, finding better balance. As for my parents, that path remained uncertain. Perhaps with time and boundaries, we could forge a healthier connection. Or perhaps I would need to accept the limitations Dorothy had described and find peace within them. Either way, I had this place, this sanctuary by the sea where I could be fully myself. I had my career that was flourishing on its own terms. I had Dorothy's unwavering belief in me, and now, possibly, a new relationship with my sister based on mutual respect rather than comparison. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts aren't the flashiest or most expensive. Sometimes they come in the form of a small key, a second chance, or the simple recognition of who you truly are. As I watched the moonlight ripple across the water outside my window, I felt something settle inside me, a sense of belonging, not to someone else's expectations, but to my own path. The journey ahead would have challenges, but for the first time, I was facing them from a place of strength rather than deficit. Some people get Teslas. Some get cottages by the sea. But the real gift is finding your own voice and the courage to use it, even when that means disrupting the comfortable patterns of the past to create something more authentic for the future. That night, I slept peacefully in my new home, lulled by the rhythm of waves against the shore, the sound of my own life, finally moving to its natural, beautiful beat. Have you ever felt overlooked in your family or received a gift that changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of people finding their own paths. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts are the ones that help us recognize ourselves.